So sometimes we have negative talk, our inner blocks. Um, what is an inner block or blocks that hold you back or are still holding you back, that used to hold you back or are holding you back?
Oh, I think lack of confidence. You know, I think truly the lack of confidence. Like, and talk about women and men. You know, I think I have this little sort of writing group from my program at Goucher, and one time there were about 5 of us, and we were texting together, and so it was coming to an end, and one of the women said, "Well, I gotta go, but I wish you all the confidence of a mediocre white man." And I thought, oh my God, that is so true. I mean, you know, like, I think it's so hard for women. You know, I look at men that I think, how do they even, I mean, not all men, and I don't mean to make this some lesbian thing here, but because it's not about that. It's really just, I am blown away by how confident some men are, you know, and a lot of men that just they have agency, and it's almost just like it's part of who they are, you know. And I would pay money to be that confident, you know, to feel like I could dream and try for some really, I wish I been braver earlier, you know, to just be able to go, oh, I could do that, and put myself out there and try some hard stuff. And, you know, I just think, you know, I think women just don't do that very much. I mean, traditionally, we haven't done that very much. We're sort of apologizing or, you know, trying not to take up very much space, and, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, it's not that it's funny because I admire that. I mean, I don't even know if I admire that confidence, but I kind of, you know, envy that confidence in men. And yet, you know, truthfully, I'm more drawn to men like Albert or Michael, men who are just like, they might be confident, but they're more real than that, you know. But I just think I would love to be more confident. And I don't even know, I don't think I've spent a lot of time like, how do you get there, you know? But that would be, I might explore that a little in the next iteration, you know.
There you go. Part of your retirement.
Yeah.
So some of what you said, do you think some of that is part of how you grew up and some of what your mom told you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, there was not a lot of confidence there. And again, I think if we went back and said, what if you learned your strengths early on and you carried that with you? Like, you know, you had like if you were going to become a chef and somebody gave you a really amazing set of knives when you were 12, you know, you'd be like, hey, I can do this, you know, and I've learned these things. And, you know, yeah, I think a lot of it comes from that, you know, and I kind of wasn't seen exactly in my family. My brothers had a lot of problems. There's a lot of trouble with them. They were both pretty serious alcoholics, and really just grim and my mom was always kind of worried about them. And I was kind of the one that could sort of bring peace to her. And, so it wasn't really about her, and it wasn't about me exactly, you know, not that, I mean, I get it. I can't even imagine if you have 2 troubled kids, but, I mean, you know, so I wish I had learned it early. But I don't know, maybe women, I don't know. Do you learn it early? I don't know. Do you think, is Daniela confident?
Yes, in some instances, and then in some instances not. I see my role as just trying to build up that confidence by giving her some positive reinforcement or highlighting what she's good at, and knowing that she's not me. And I have to always remember that whatever skills I have, she may not necessarily have. But I try to
want those things. You know, that's the other thing. You know, I think that, you know, what if you know, and I think you get a lot of attention, you know, still for being pretty or being, you know, charming. I mean, you know, whatever female characteristics young women feel, you know, I think or young women have, then you're supposed to be that, you know, and not, I mean, I think Daniela is all those things already, but I don't know. It's just a hard world I think it's harder to be a female growing up than a male, but I don't know that. Maybe it's hard too, you know, to be a man. So
I think everyone goes in different ways, the confidence level.
yeah.
So you mentioned that you're lesbian, and in your career, did that impact you in any way, being out? And I don't know if you were out the whole entire time you were in your career or not.
Well, it you know, it did in this way. And it's certainly, that's probably a huge part of the lack of confidence, because I certainly didn't, you know, and I grew up in the 50s and 60s. So I was in high school from 1965 to 1969, which is not a time that people were talking about being gay, you know, at all. But so really it was shameful. I felt shame, and I felt like I couldn't see anything that for myself, ahead of myself, that looked like me. You know, I couldn't see people that looked like me. And it wasn't even that well articulated in my brain, but I think you just kind of go, yeah, I don't see, there's not a thing there, you know? And so when I was in college, and I finally was out, and then I knew more people that were gay, and then I could see that. And, you know, and really I started teaching kind of late, like I was 29 when I started teaching. And so by that time I was kind of out to my colleagues. I was never really out to my students. And I don't know now if I would be. I think sometimes it sort of gets in the way of, like in a classroom situation, but I was always pretty out with my colleagues, and certainly was always out at City and with people I worked with, and that was really good, and it was empowering. And but it's a thing for sure. I mean, it doesn't you know, it doesn't, I mean, it's always a thing in my mind. And because there's this piece about you can hide it, and then you think, but what's that like, that you know, how would that be that you would, what kind of impact does that have on one to grow up hiding something, you know? And, you know, that's not good. And because I remember early on, like I had a longtime partner when I was young, when I was 23. And that was when I came out to I was kind of out before that, but not to my parents. But during that time, I came out to my mother. My father was kind of a non-entity. I mean, he was a nice guy, I guess, but he was kind of a non-entity. But my mother, of course, was sort of freaked out, you know, and, you know, and she got over it, but to the extent that she got over anything. But anyway, so then in that relationship, that's when I started teaching during that period of time. And it was we lived together. We took care of a family, a woman that was connected to my family. She lived with us for about 10 years, and she lived to be 98 years old. But anyway, so it was it was a nice picture, right? You know, it was a good thing, and I could be out. It was kind of I always think of it as the time that I sort of grew up, really, in that period of time. But then I had to leave that relationship because I had never lived on my own, and I'd never been in the world. I had never lived by myself ever, one time. And so I was like, and she was like, well, couldn't you just do that here? And I was like, no, I have to live by myself, you know? And so it was really, really good. I mean, it was hard. I was a terrible leaver, but it was hard. It was really good to do it. And then I kind of could grow up and have a lot of other things happen. But it was all about really about relationships, you know, like once I was out of that relationship, once we were split up, and then I moved into this little apartment downtown, and it was like almost like being 18, you know, like now I'm going to be a grown-up in the world. Now I'm out. I kind of get who I am. And it was almost like how people are when they're, you know, as I say, like 18 or 20, except I was, you know, like whatever, 34, something like that. But really to sort of date people and kind of decide what I wanted. And, you know, so kind of like starting to build a person. It was the first time I started going to therapy, sort of building a person during that time. And in that same period of time, my mother was was very anxious and depressed in her life. And so she was really needy of me. And one of my brothers had died by that time, kind of tragically, of course, because that wouldn't be this story if it weren't that. But so I remember this. And so I lived in that apartment, and I was going to therapy, and my mother would be like, oh, you know, she wanted me to come and hang out with her all the time. And I said, you know, I can't do it. You have to do this on your own, because otherwise I'm going to come home. I have to go home. And then what are you going to do then? You know? And I mean, I was learning all this stuff in therapy, right. You know, and how to kind of, separate from her. And so finally she started taking antidepressants, and it was really, really good, because she finally, and what I always say about taking Prozac is that I feel all of the stuff I always felt before, but the bottom is not as low as it used to be. And so now I can see over the top, and then I can move, and movement is, I mean, you know, physically and emotionally being able to move is how you can change it, right? You know, I mean, how you can kind of, you just don't get stuck. And so she experienced that finally for the first time in her life. And she was 76 years old. And so then, so I'm going to therapy, she's going to therapy. We're kind of, you know, doing this thing. And in the middle of that, one day she has a stroke and dies, like out of the blue. And I know, and it was, and weirdly, I had an appointment at my therapist the next day. Now I was teaching at City by this time, and, you know, my life was, and I kind of had a girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I go to my therapist the next day, and, you know, we had talked about my relationship with my mother for 10 years, probably not 10 years, but a long time. And so I have this appointment the next day, or just happened because she had died on a Sunday. And so the next day I have this appointment, and I go in and I say, you're not going to believe what happened yesterday. You know, my mother died, and, you know, it was horrific in a certain way, but we had done all the work, you know, we had done the work. And so I didn't feel like, oh my God, I was a terrible child or a terrible daughter, or we didn't say all the stuff. I mean, we said all the stuff. But then it was like, now I can be free of this, you know, now I can. And the most troubled of the brothers had died 10 years before that. So I was just kind of allowed to kind of be a separate person after that, you know. And it was in a weird way, what needed to happen, you know. And then I could start building a person really, really legitimately during that period of time. And, you know, again, this was like late 1980s, you know. So I'm like, you know, late 30s, or, you know, mid to late 30s, but still, that's just kind of the timeline of it, you know, for me. So I think so I've always feel like that if you just kind of laid my timeline on other people's timeline, it's just much later than everyone else's, you know? So I know that was more than you asked.